I started building furniture about 8 years ago when my husband was out of work and we needed some extra money. My business was taking custom orders, and at the time, tufted headboards were really popular. Traditional tufting is really time-consuming and can be kind of difficult. To save time, I came up with a really quick and easy no-sew method that I started using on all my headboards. I wrote a blog post showing this trick about 6 years ago, but I realized it's finally time to make a video. So keep watching to learn how to tuft a headboard, a bench, an ottoman, anything the really quick and easy way. This video is sponsored by Arrow Fastener. When brainstorming what kind of furniture would show off this technique the best, I thought of this really simple bench idea that I've been brainstorming for a while. I had a leftover piece of some really nice Euro-ply maple plywood that I had left over from building my kids' bunk beds a few years ago. I started by using a circular saw to break down the plywood piece into 4 15-inch squares. So if you're thinking my workshop looks a little different, it's because it is. We are getting ready to build a house. I told you guys about that in my swinging terrarium video. And while we're doing that, we are staying in a rental house. So that means my workshop, all my tools, everything is in a single car garage. And so far it's working, but it's definitely tight. I wanted to make sure that my square panels were perfectly square at 90 degrees. So once I made my first cut, I took the panels over to my miter saw to help me make the cuts a little bit more accurately. Since 15 inches is wider than the maximum cutting depth on my saw, I had to flip the panel over to complete the cut. If you don't have a sliding miter saw, don't worry. You can get cuts that are just as good with a circular saw if you're patient. When I was done, I had 4 matching 15 by 15 inch plywood panels. Next, to help me get ready for the joinery, I found the center on one of the sides. I then measured 3/8 of an inch on either side of my marking to create a 3/4 inch wide channel down the middle. If this is the first Pneumatic Datic video that you've seen, welcome! Make sure you subscribe so you get notified every time I release a new video. To avoid having to mark every single panel, I clamped pairs together using some spring clamps. I then took the panels back to my miter saw to create parallel cuts. I stopped the cuts halfway through the length of the panels. To complete the cuts and remove the rest of the joint area, I used a jigsaw. I used a similar technique on my faux brass leg media console, but on that project I used a circular saw to cut grooves and dados and then finished up with a jigsaw. Are you liking what you see? Make sure you tap that like button just down below. When the joint areas were all cut, I could then slide pairs of panels together, creating an X-shaped leg. This joint is called a crosslap. So when I was cutting these joints on the miter saw, I was being really careful not to go past this line on the end. And then I realized by the time I put the two pieces together, you're not going to see it anyways. So might as well just cut all the way through and make my life easier, right? The next step was to give the plywood a good sanding and round over those rough edges. Gluing the panels together to create the bench legs was really easy. I just applied some carpenter's glue to the joint area and then slid the panels onto one another. I used a speed square to make sure that the panels were square with one another as well as sitting vertically. Once the glue was dry, I wiped down the plywood to remove all the dust and then applied 2 coats of Simple Finish from Maker Brand Co. That was it for the base of the bench. Time to move on to the seat. I ordered a piece of 48-inch by 18-inch by 2-inch thick foam for the seat cushion, and it came in this impossibly small box. I opened it up and allowed the foam to rest and fluff up to its full thickness. I needed something to create the structure of the seat and attach the foam to. I decided to use a 48-inch long piece of 16-inch wide MDF shelving that I had left over from setting up my new shop. When the foam was at its full size, I placed the shelving on top of the foam and traced the width using a Sharpie. I was able to cut this foam pretty easily with a pair of sharp scissors, but if you have an electric kitchen knife, that is the best for cutting upholstery foam. In my experience, the best way to attach foam to wood is using contact cement. By far the easiest to apply is the spray kind that comes in a can. I applied a layer of the contact cement to both the MDF shelving as well as the underside of the foam cushion. I then flipped the shelving over and aligned it on top of the foam. Next came upholstery. Like I mentioned before, I've done a fair amount of upholstery in the past, enough to know that a good cordless stapler is worth the money. I recently picked up an Arrow T50 DCD stapler, as well as some wide crown staples and a staple puller. For this project, I used Arrow T50 3/8" by 3/8" heavy-duty staples. The T50 DCD has a rechargeable lithium-ion battery, which is so convenient, and it packs more than enough power to drive the staples into the MDF shelving panel I was using. Upholstering a seat cushion is actually pretty simple. I started by laying the fabric I was going to use face down onto a soft surface. For most seating projects, especially one that's going to have tufting, I definitely recommend a heavier weight upholstery grade fabric. Next, I laid down a sheet of high loft quilter's batting, the kind of stuff you find inside of a blanket. I then flipped the seat cushion on top of the batting and centered it. I checked to make sure that I had enough clearance on all sides to wrap the fabric and batting all the way around to the underside of the cushion. I then grabbed the fabric with firm but even pressure in the middle of one of the long sides and began to staple it to the underside of the cushion. To ensure even tension on the fabric, I then switched to the other side and tacked down the middle of the fabric on that side of the cushion as well. I then worked my way down the sides, pulling firmly and evenly as I could and attaching the fabric. The Arrow T50 DCD can fire up to 500 staples on a single charge, so I never had to worry about running out of enough juice. After wrapping the ends of the cushions, it was time to tackle the corners, which are the only slightly tricky part of the process. I pulled back the fabric and used scissors to cut out as much of the excess batting as I could. I also trimmed off a little bit of the excess fabric. I was then able to pull the corner tight and wrap it like you would the end of a present. Once the cushion was fully wrapped and upholstered, it was time to turn my attention to the buttons. I picked up a 7/8" covered button kit from my local fabric store. I somehow forgot to film that process, but I just followed the instructions and covered 3 buttons. Now I'm finally going to be talking about what you came here for, the tufting. I used a white pencil and a measuring tape to mark out the locations of where I wanted the individual tufts. I was going for a modern look to match the plywood base, so I wanted fewer and shallower tufting. The secret for really fast and easy tufting is just screws and washers. I know, pretty simple, right? Since the base of my cushion was 3/4 of an inch thick, I used 3/4 inch number 8 screws and washers with a diameter about 5/8 of an inch. I positioned my screw and my drill directly over the pencil mark on the cushion and pressed firmly straight down. Applying constant pressure, I slowly drove the screw into the base of the cushion, securing the fabric tightly to the bottom. If you can find them, steel and neoprene sealing washers actually work best for this. To cover the heads of the exposed screws, I applied a little bit of hot glue to the tang or the loop on the bottom of my covered buttons, and then pressed and held them in place while they cooled. Once the buttons were attached, I could put the pieces together and the bench was done. Since we're in a rental property and have at least one more move in us this year, I intentionally didn't attach the seat to the legs of the bench. It's actually very stable just sitting on top of it, and I like the idea of being able to break the pieces apart and move them freely if needed. If you're worried at all about the hot glue holding up, I've had a bench that I upholstered this way about 3 or 4 years ago, and it's still holding on great. I haven't lost a single button. If you're looking for more traditional deep diamond tufting, I wrote a whole blog post about how you can achieve that look. I'll leave a link in the description box. So tell me what you think about upholstered projects. Do you like them? Do you want to see more? If you're curious about my normal types of projects, make sure to check out this video. And this one as well. Remember to hit that subscribe button down below if you haven't already, and thanks for watching, guys.